Welcome back to the Housing Collective. My name is Tom Neely, Director of Nemar Search, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Sarah Thomas, Chief Executive of RHP. So Sarah, thank you ever so much for joining us on today's episode. And for the listeners, could you give us a brief introduction to yourself and your organisation?
Hello. Hi, Tom. It's great to be talking with you this morning. So for people that don't know me, I'm Sarah Thomas. I'm the Chief Executive at an organisation called RHP. RHP is a London-based housing provider. We own and manage just over 11,000 homes, and this number is ever increasing as we continue to build more homes for local people, as well as acquiring stock from others. Since 2000, when RHP was created, we've gradually extended our reach, and in today's world, we operate in Richmond, Hounslow, Kingston and Hillingdon, and our purpose is to provide safe, secure homes, opening door to life opportunities.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. And what I want to do on this podcast, Sarah, is pick up firstly your career, because we've obviously known each other for quite a number of years now, but you have a fabulous career journey. So can you just, for the listeners, can you talk us through your career journey from Eurostar to now becoming the Chief Executive of RHP?
Yes, of course. I've been in the housing sector for nearly 14 years, would you believe it now? And before that, my career was in the commercial sector. And immediately prior to the coming into the housing sector, I worked for Eurostar, and I worked in the senior team at Eurostar for a period of 8 years. 5 of those years, I ran Eurostar stations, or we call them terminals, across the UK, France and Belgium. And towards the end of that role, I oversaw the overnight move from Waterloo Station to St Pancras in the UK, which was a real proud moment for me in my career, not only having run operations, but also being part of that amazing project. Also at Eurostar for 3 years, I developed Eurostar's first ever customer experience strategy. It was in response to increasing competition from the newly emerging low-cost airlines, and also from a competitive drive from British Airways and Air France to really create the business product in air travel that we know so much today. So all of a sudden, Eurostar went from an organisation that really focused on city centre product advantage and had to adapt quickly to the competition and provide service advantage. So my job was to create the customer experience strategy, but also to implement it through a large-scale business transformation program over 3 countries we operated in, and involving just over 3,000 colleagues and contractors during that change. So that was sort of set me up nicely for my career, having done something very operational, being an operational leader, but also being a strategic leader, to think about my next move. And that's when I came into the housing sector, never looked back. My first role was actually here at RHP. Nearly 14 years ago, I was Executive Director of Customer Services and looked after everything to do with customer, housing, also property, so the plan programs and all the asset management strategy. And from there, I moved to Guinness, which is obviously a national organisation, much larger breadth and scale. I was also Executive Director of Customer Services at Guinness. And then I moved to Catalyst, where I was COO and Deputy Chief Executive. And then during my last 6 months at Catalyst, I was Interim Chief Executive as I steered the organisation through towards merger with Peabody. And then finally, COO at Peabody, obviously post-merger, an organisation of some scale and with lots of rich history. And from there, 18 months ago, I came back to RHP as Chief Executive.
It's a brilliant story, and keen to pick up on a few of those points that you've mentioned there, Sarah. I mean, in particular, you clearly had some really great successes at Eurostar. So how has your experience in the private sector, particularly at that Eurostar, around kind of your CX strategy, influenced your approach to leadership in the housing sector?
It's a very good question, and one I get asked quite a bit. And I think the skills that you see in the commercial sector are very evident in the housing sector. But what personally I draw on are probably 3 things. So firstly, when you're operating in a market environment, and for anyone that's ever worked in a market, commercial environment, there is, to be successful, there's this dual focus that has to be equally weighted. And one is the customer experience, so really understanding your customers and what is going to make them buy things from you, and the internal efficiency to deliver that at the cheapest possible, most effective way. Because what you're trying to do is maximize profit. So you want to land the product or service exactly in the sweet spot for the customer, but you want to do it in the most cost-effective way to maximize your profit. And I think, although in the commercial sector that's done for commercial reasons, for profit, I think in our world, that skill set of being able to, the duality of being able to understand customer needs and deliver them in the most effective, efficient way is actually a really good match for our own strategic goals and our own purposes as organisations within the housing sector. Secondly, I'd say managing finances and financial resources in a really tight, volatile environment means you become very practiced at making difficult and delivering difficult decisions. And I think particularly now, I mean, if we read the recently published sector risk profile, which the regulators recently published, it's very clear that boards and executive teams are going to have to look at making some of those difficult financial trade-offs. And having practices that helps the ability and the process, but also the empathy when you're going through that process. And finally, I'd say in the commercial sector, it's very much results and performance orientated, so much outcome driven. And again, it's about balancing risk and reward enabled to achieve the best outcomes. In the commercial sector, that will be the best outcomes in terms of performance of the organisation. In our sector, it's often about the best outcomes for our residents.
It's really interesting. And I guess just out of interest, Sarah, what motivated you to make that transition from the commercial sector to housing? Because it has very much, like I say, there's that dual focus, but in very different ways in housing as it probably did at Eurostar.
I'd love to say that there was, I'd done sector analysis and I got all the data and looked at the opportunity. Actually, what it was a very, very attractive job ad in the Times by RHP, which hooked my interest. And once I was hooked, I saw at an organisational level what an innovative organisation RHP was. It was an innovative strategy. It was customer-centric culture, which obviously is important to me, and big aspirations. And it was kind of just drew me in. So I'd love to say there was more thought to it than that, but actually it was a bit of a heart-led decision, not a head-led decision.
Yeah, I guess with that then, you obviously joined the sector nearly 14 years ago. So how has your perspective on the housing sector evolved since you first entered it 14 years ago?
The thing that I found really striking when I joined the sector was how much as a sector people cared about what they did and really cared about the outcomes and the quality of the outcomes that were delivered, in particular for residents, but also for the organisation and colleagues. And that, I don't feel that's changed at all. I think that is one of the amazing qualities of our sector and amazing attractions for working here. However, what I feel has changed is that externally, I think we're kindly unknown. I mean, I didn't really know about the housing sector before I came into the sector, and that being unknown allowed us to kind of get on with things. And occasionally we got a bit annoyed or frustrated that we all the things we were doing weren't recognised. But then, of course, they suddenly were, but they're not quite how we would have wanted. And so I think the impact of that on people is not that they care any more or less. I think they've always cared. But I've seen some of the enjoyment that people had from working in this sector dissipate a bit. And the sector tends to be, by the media, treated as one, like all organisations are the same. And our organisations are different and diverse, and we serve different needs and different people in our communities. And I think that has taken out some of the enjoyment, and that is obviously, as leaders, that's something we'll need to address in order to retain and attract all the wonderful talent that's out there within our organisations.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point, and we'll definitely pick up that later in a few questions that I want to ask you, Sarah. I mean, just and looking at your career, you clearly had, as we spoke about just then, you had some really significant roles as an executive in such large scale organisations such as Guinness, and as you said there, post merger as COO at Peabody. So, just from those large national organisation, Peabody being quite a significant player as well. I mean, what did you learn from those experiences, which you've then been able to take back as chief executive of RHP?
So as a leader in a large organisation, what's really important, particularly where you've got large teams, is being able to lead through others. So it's all about delegating and delegating effectively. It's pretty much a must. And this was the same, obviously, when I ran the stations in the UK, France and Belgium. I was operating across 3 countries with a large team at Guinness, Catalyst, and particularly Peabody. At Peabody, I managed regional managing directors who each, in their own right, had very large teams and areas to manage. So it's about leading through leaders and delegation, and it's getting a good balance between giving direction and also giving others control, and getting that balance as effective as possible, and getting the balance between knowing the detail and looking at the picture, the bigger picture, in the most effective balance there as well. And it's always a bit of a push and pull on these things, but it's trying to work out with your team, the individuals and the capability and the talent of your team and your objectives of where your organisation is, how you balance those things.
Yeah, and you've obviously been a really successful chief operating officer and now chief executive. Do you see those roles differing in terms of a leadership approach?
I think they're very different, and my advice would be for anyone that is looking to be a chief executive to really think about the chief executive role, because for other roles I've done, it's been a continuation. I've been a leader of a team, and I might have had a large operational team or I might have had a smaller strategic team, but you're leading people to achieve things within a function. And the COO has a broad range of different functions within their functional responsibility. But ultimately, however large the role, it's broad, it's varied, but it's still a function, and you still have peers. And the COO role is about doing things really well within the function, and that broadly will be running operations well on a day-to-day basis and achieving functional KPIs, and being able to direct and motivate very large teams, as well as delivering the corporate strategy and plan. So all those things are in play. But the CEO role is so very different, because that's about working closely with the board. It's about setting the strategic direction. It's about having the bigger picture view, like an umbrella over the functions. And it's also about externally being the face of the organisation, maintaining a good network to draw from, building relationships with stakeholders. And most of all, it's about looking ahead and looking at the future. So while the rest of the organisation is delivering, you're the connection between the organisation and the board in looking ahead. What's coming? What's next? What needs to change? What can we anticipate?
And how have you found that transition? Because as you say they're 2 very different roles.
Yes, I think I was very fortunate in being given the opportunity by the Catalyst board of running Catalyst for 6 months, because I got the opportunity to try before you buy, as it were. And it enabled me to really understand the role. And it's quite intense, because obviously not every day as chief executive you also have to go through a merger opportunity as well and achieve it. But it really gave me a really good flavour, and I think that was quite a unique opportunity in that I really was able to determine whether it's a role I wanted to do in my future career or not. So big thanks to the Catalyst board.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also a baptism of fire, wasn't it? Because like I say, I can always remember you say kind of try before you buy, but also go through a merger in your first kind of 6 months as a trial kind of CEO. It's a big old job that you had when you was there. So that I completely understand that. And I guess just one thing that I also wanted to ask you, so which clearly a lot of kind of candidates, no matter what level, sometimes have this kind of predicament. You have returned to an organisation where you worked there back 13, 14 years ago now. So how have you found that returning back to RHP? And also, what advice would you give to someone who may be thinking about making that move back to an organisation where they may have worked previously?
I've really enjoyed coming back to RHP, and one of the things that I have loved about rejoining the organisation is seeing how many people who are still here, but they're not here in the same jobs. They've progressed their careers within the organisation, sometimes in the same sort of subject matter, and sometimes they've gone and done completely different things. And the first time I was at RHP, I had a colleague called Amina Graham, who some of you might know, who was Executive Director of Corporate Services. And Amina introduced something called the climbing frame. And her vision was that we would be able to retain our talent by creating multiple opportunities within the organisation for people to develop their careers. And what I saw when I came back with the 8-year gap is I saw that being achieved and the outcome of that, which at its time was very innovative, and not just in the sector, but across all sectors. And that's a real delight to see how people have grown, and real proof that you can grow your own. So that was great. My advice would be just to spend some time thinking about how you're going to be perceived, because the only information people have on you really is what you were like when you worked there before. And if there are many people, as there are at RHP, who remember that, it's being very clear from the outset why what you're doing is different, because they have to reform their relationships with you, and you have to reform your relationships with them. But it's harder for them because they've only known you in the setting, whereas I've had experience of other settings. So really being very mindful of that, and putting time and effort into that, so that you can get some really good rapport and working relationships, and people have real clarity about how am I going to work with Sarah in this new role compared to how I worked with her in my last time she was here.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you, Sarah, and well done to Amina as well for the climbing frame analogy. So that's brilliant to hear that it's still ongoing even after all these years, which is great. So and
still going brilliantly,
still going strong. So well done, Amina. So it's and I've got to talk to you about RHP and clearly the evolution of RHP, shall we say, with you at the helm. So you obviously. RHP was an organisation who is known in the sector to be very much digital first. And if I can bring up a quote, bear with 1 second, Sarah. So digital first, so much so that there was an article back in 2017 that stated RHP aims to be turn the world of landlord management upside down by using new technology. And clearly RHP was definitely that way, kind of 10 years ago. So, but since joining, you've obviously taken a slightly different approach. So can you just talk to me a bit more about your new strategic approach for RHP?
Yes, and actually just to set that in some context, because obviously I was part of that strategy and innovation. One of the reasons that I said why I joined RHP because of its innovative strategy. And when I joined RHP, and then the 5 years I worked with RHP, the first time I was here, we very much achieved that digital presence. We moved our transactional activities online and made it easy for residents to interact with us online. And in the last year I was here, I introduced something called the Sundown Team, and our ambition was to achieve close everyone's inquiry by the end of the day, by sunset. Obviously easier in the summer than the winter.
Yeah, of course.
So that was the thing. So that was great. And then obviously I left RHP and all that was going on. And I think whether we were the first to do it or we weren't, who knows? But we were proud of what we'd achieved, and we tried and a few things, and we'd had some great successes actually. But obviously the world changed quite dramatically while I was away, and it was happening in the organisations I was working for. And of course it was happening at RHP too. So first off, just after I left, was a 1% rent cut for 4 years, which really curtailed all of our organisations' ability to invest in our homes, invest in new builds and invest in technology. then we've all learned significant lessons from Grenfell, which have been really important to prioritise and implement. We've had COVID sort of threw the world up a bit for a couple of years, and there are still ongoing impacts from COVID and changes, and some will be with us forever and some will change back. And then we had Brexit as well, and the impact of Brexit. So one of the things I love about the culture here at RHP is it's not just about innovation, it's about agility and being fleet of foot. And RHP's got this great ability to say, okay, we're not going to be able to do that anymore. We've had this big ambition or aspiration, but actually that route has been close to us. So let's adapt and change and be innovative still, but in our new environment and in our new conditions. So the conditions have changed, but the agility and the innovation hasn't. And in a way, we've come full circle, because now what's important to us is reconnecting with our communities, providing a human service, and being a visible presence in our neighbourhoods for our customers. And when I joined as Chief Executive and developed with the board and our customers and our colleagues what was going to be our strategy for the next 3 years, it really was about being anchored in our communities and being a local organisation. So our new vision has 4 pillars with goals underneath those pillars. So it's about being socially responsible, high-performing, community-connected and values-based. And through that, we hope we can create trust and rebuild trust with our communities and with our customers. So a couple of examples of how we've brought this to life recently. We've introduced a new community engagement team, and the community engagement team has been out there visibly, physically connecting with our communities. Now, in the past, RHP did invest in community engagement quite a bit, actually, but we can't afford to do that anymore. So this is about a small investment on our side, but lots and lots of partnership working and doing more with our partners than we can on our own. And a couple of examples of that. So a local lady who lives in Richmond, she works in marketing in the commercial sector, but she wanted to do something. She wanted to give back socially. So she used her commercial skills to negotiate with Waitrose and Boots to get them to donate hygiene and sanitary products to give to the local community in Richmond to people who can't afford those products. But she got a bit stuck with, well, how am I going to do this? Now, we obviously met with her, and what we're doing is we're the distributor because we know who needs them. So she had the products. We haven't got the skills to get we don't have the money to invest in people to do that. So she's got the stuff, and we're distributing the stuff to the people who need it and promote and using our comms channels to promote it as well. So that's one example. Another is the Richmond Furniture Scheme, which has a big warehouse. They do up furniture, and they sell it at very low rates to people who can't afford furniture on the market. And we collect lots of furniture in our bulk rubbish collections. And prior to that, we were paying to take them to the refuse disposal centre. So now we take them to the scheme, who do them up and then sell them probably onto some of our own residents who are looking for a low-cost way of furnishing their new homes when they move in.
That is really nice. That's great. And just an out of interest, Sarah, you look at. I was reading a Housemarque report this morning, actually, and there was on their summary note, it was talking about rebuilding trust within communities, and data that they have says that it will take 18 months for a customer to rebuild trust. So 18 months is a lot of time, and clearly there's a lot of money invested there. So how do you balance that? Because clearly there's got to be that investment in money, but also given all the conflicting challenges that you're facing as an organisation, there's only one pot of money, and it's not as big as the pot used to be. So how do you balance that while staying core to your true values?
So much of building trust is around communication, and communication costs very little, actually. Yes, there's a base core cost, but a lot of it is about using communication to open up what your organisation is doing, so people can see. And what many of our customers have said to me is, oh, if I'd known about that, and then I would have been much more understanding. And so maybe it's about being a bit braver about sharing the warts and all, and asking our customers to help us with what their ideas and their ways to deal with some of the challenges. But whenever we've done that RHP, we've had a warm response from customers. Now, obviously, we have to get our service right. And every time we let a customer down service-wise, say with a repair, that's going to chip away at that trust or delete that trust. And it takes, I agree, it probably takes longer than 18 months if you let someone down and practically to rebuild that trust. But that's about basic service delivery. That's our bread and butter. That's what we do. So, yes, as I said, there are many trade-offs that we're dealing with at the moment. We are having to balance finances, risk, reward, but some of the things are actually very durable within the financial envelopes that we're operating within.
Of course. And I guess with that, Sarah, how do you balance that social mission of a housing association with the need to also deliver, frankly, strong business to performance to keep the wheels going?
But it kind of comes back to that learning from the commercial sector. For me, one of the things that I've taken with me from the commercial sector, which is if you understand your customer needs and then you target delivery of those in the most cost efficient way, then that's exactly what we're trying to achieve as well through our social impact and social purpose. So I think, although it can be challenging and difficult, and I don't want to diminish how challenging and difficult it can be, if you have the bigger picture of that in mind, it is doable.
It's interesting. And just to touch on the strategic approach that you're taking now, Sarah, clearly what's great within RHP, as you rightly said, kind of the culture is all around agility. So you kind of that, however, doesn't happen that often in organisations. So a new chief executive comes in, or even a new senior leader comes in and has a different approach to what was there before. And sometimes you have those traditional views of going, well, I'm not doing that because we've always done it this way. So what advice would you give to leaders who are looking to change a strategic approach when I guess it's been so embedded of they've always done it the other way for so many years in an organisation?
So for me personally, and this is coming from my approach, it's important to understand the why. So why are you doing it? And then explaining that why to the whole organisation so that they get it as much as you do. And that might be in different words or in different ways. And not everyone will agree, but it's still being able to explain the why. And then it's giving everyone a bit of control over the how so that everyone can have impact and deliver it. And everyone has the means in which to deliver it.
It's really interesting. And like I say, some of those parts of that, I guess almost co-creation sometimes gets forgotten about, doesn't it? When because you're so embedded in wanting to deliver change, it's making sure that you're taking everyone on a journey. And I think that does sometimes get overlooked, particularly given the pressures that we're on. And I guess my final question, Sarah, you talked about kind of your vision for RHP and the new kind of strategic priorities there and also values, as you say. But what do you see looking forward as it's a challenging outlook, it's a challenging environment that housing associations face, but what do you see as some of the really key opportunities that the sector has, which we can take hold of over the coming years?
Connecting with our communities is really exciting because that in a way is how our world has changed in maybe the last decade. And some of that is because of COVID, and some of that is because of the global environment and global changes. And I feel in my own community that community has become more connected over time. And if you look at the local politics, it's much more in the media, and there's a lot more tension and focus on local politics. And it feels like that's a real opportunity to be involved in communities. Again, it feels like that's something coming through. And I might just be speaking for London because that's where I live and that's where I work. But it feels that is an opportunity. It's about human beings connecting with human beings at the same time as using all the advances in technology. And to be clear, RHP is still about technology and being innovative. We're not moving away from that. We're just doing other things as well and balancing the human presence with the using all the opportunities that new technology provides us with.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, as I always do when we catch up. But thank you so much for joining us. I mean, before I do let you go, Sarah, no pressure. We do have some quick fire questions that I want to run through, which we do with every guest. So, what is your most valuable leadership lesson that you've learned?
So don't worry about things outside of your control. Focus on how you respond is the best piece of advice I've ever had. It helps you to sleep at night, if nothing else.
Fantastic. Unless you have babies that we've spoken about before we started recording.
But they're within your control. That's how you respond.
Yeah, that is a very good point. I need to remember that for tonight. And what I guess what advice do you give to an aspiring leader starting out on their journey?
Learn from as many people as possible, and don't accept things at face value. Look at the data, use your intuition, form your own view.
Brilliant. And what do you believe to be some of the key leadership qualities required in today's world?
As I spoke about the difference between the COO role and the chief executive role, it's that ability to be able to anticipate what's coming is really important. And the world's changing so fast, and there's so many moving parts that trying to navigate through that really requires that ability. Building diverse and active networks for fun, obviously, but more so you can get other thinking, alternative thinking, good ideas. Ability to lead through others, which I've mentioned, particularly in large organisations. Great communication skills always, and at the moment, bucket load of resilience is required.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And final question, so one leadership book recommendation that you give to the listeners?
Oh, I'm going to pull it up. I'm reading this at the moment.
Oh, fantastic.
You can see the bookmark, which is it's called Perform. It's by Keith Hatter, Chris Shambrick, and Jim Constable. And Keith Hatter set up an organisation many, many years ago called Planet K2. And we use them at Eurostar for all of our executive and leadership coaching. And they base their coaching, they're performance coaches, not just general coaches, and they base their coaching on sectors where performance is a natural part of day-to-day delivery, such as being a world-class athlete or an Olympian. And it's a challenging book and at times uncomfortable reading because it does challenge some of the norms we're used to speaking about. In terms of development, but if you're serious about performance and you're interested in personal and team and therefore organisational performance, definitely worth the read. And it's got a nice tone to it. It's quite amusing at times.
Brilliant. Great. Well, I will order that as soon as we finish this recording, Sarah. So thank you for that as well. So and I'm sure the listeners will as well. So Sarah, thank you for joining us on the Housing Collective podcast, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon as well.
Thank you, Tom.